Thank you all for coming back. We're on to item 9, Cabinet Business, and the report from the Leader of the Council. So if I can ask Councillor Golby to introduce his report.
Thank you, Chair. I won't read the report out, but I'm pleased to submit the report as it's tabled. I think it covers the most notable of the areas concerning the Council at the moment, i.e. the serious case reviews that came out 2 weeks ago, the work underway in children's services, and the roadway and work that's going on in the Unity project. So I'm happy to submit the report, Chair.
Councillor Stone.
Just one quick question, if I may, Chair,
Yeah.
on the Leader's report. It says under number 6, there's been a number of changes in Cabinet. There's been a new Cabinet post created, and I'd just like to ask how this can possibly be justified to spend more money on Cabinet posts when we're short of cash, when we need more money for children's services, and, you know, what is it that's happening that has provoked that kind of decision? I really don't get that. If you'd be kind enough to tell us, that'd be great.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hughes, did you want to say something?
I'd like to ask a question.
Yeah.
Under item 14 of the report, it says we should communicate and advertise what is good about Northamptonshire. I thoroughly endorse that. My question concerns Chester Farm, where we do have the money to finish it, but sadly the builders seem to have dragged to a halt. And it really is a great asset. Now we've done it, and we've got the money to finish it. Can please something be done to get the builders active again? It was supposed to be finished last July. Can we have it finished before we cease to exist?
Thank you very much. We've got a series of questions submitted under Rule 10.2. If I can go through and ask if there's any supplementaries for those. The first one was a question to Councillor Golby from Councillor Stone.
Just a quick supplementary.
Yeah.
AI and robotics is obviously going to be something that affects the local economy greatly, and I just wondered if we should be looking at it in terms of our transformation strategy a bit more closely. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to respond, Councillor Golby?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think there's a reasonable answer here, given here, that describes the opportunities and issues around AI and robotics. But what I do know is that there's some very good work going on, which is a part of the transformation strategy in adult social care, that is making a marked difference with how we look after and how we free up capacity and enable some of our more elderly residents to stay at home, basically. So I know that some of that work is going on. And I think I agree the profile of this needs to be raised over the coming period. And again, maybe it needs to be reflected more in the Unity programme. So I'm happy to take that forward. Just going back on the points raised by Councillor Stone on the extra cabinet member, when we did have the cabinet last year, we're back up to the same amount, but if you look at the roles and responsibilities in cabinet, they reflect exactly, as it says in the report, the corporate restructure that has gone on within the organisation, and we've got some good people in cabinet that I have every faith in that is going to support and help the organisation to transfer itself into and through the Unity programme. As far as Chester Farm goes, Councillor Hughes' question, Councillor Lizzie Bowen, one of her areas of responsibility is looking at the future of Chester Farm. We have had some funding through the Heritage Lottery Fund, and we know that that is a project that needs some attention and needs a way forward. So maybe in a short time, at some appropriate point, Councillor Bowen can give an update on where we are with Chester Farm. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That would be useful. Coming back to our written questions, on question 2, which is a question to Councillor Morris from Councillor Hales, is there any more you'd like to ask Councillor Hales on that? Oh, it would have helped if I'd have looked in that direction first. I'm sorry about that. Is Councillor Hales going to come back, or do we not know?
Mr. Chairman, she's not well and she's went home.
Oh, okay, yeah, fine. Okay. Councillor, question 3, sorry, to Councillor Morris again from Councillor Birch.
Supplementary, please, just a quick one. Thank you very much for your very full and informative reply. Could I, the last paragraph, filling any gaps and alternative ways of keeping victims safe, could I suggest that prevention is always better than cure, to support the families and the children before they get to the stage of needing intervention on a much higher level is probably much more cost effective and in the long term effective to keep the families together and the parents safe.
Thank you very much. Question 4. Sorry. Does Councillor Morris want to say anything?
Thank you, Chair.
You-
I
you
concur
were
with
looking
Councillor Birch
ambivalent,
on
yes.
the point that you've brought up. We will have a look at that, but obviously we'll have to be mindful of budgets in all areas. So we will have a look and I will come back to you on that specific question. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Question 4 to Councillor Bowen from Councillor Stamborough. Did you want to ask more?
Well predicted, Chair. Yes, I'd like to ask a supplementary if I can. Thank you, Councillor Bowen, for the answer, which tells us what we're doing if there is no group paying rent on the premises and no library at Higham Ferrers. But surely best value all round would be to agree a rent that the group can afford to pay, to receive that income and to continue with a library in Higham Ferrers. Does Councillor Bowen not agree with me?
Councillor Bowen?
Thank you for your question. In truth, I've only just received this portfolio in the last week, and what I'm intending to do is do a thorough analysis of where we're at, where we're going, what needs to be done, and then at that stage I'll be able to respond to you accordingly.
Thank you. Question 5 is to Councillor Baker from Councillor Stone. Would you like to ask a supplementary?
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you very much for the answers here. Could you give a guarantee to us that decisions made by the professional body where they incur costs are actioned, or do they have to go to the commissioners for agreement incurring time delay? That's the bit that I'm really worried about. If, for example, there is a professional decision that a family needs to go to a family assessment centre in the hope that they will prevent family breakdown and keep the children with the parents, that is a time-consuming and costly endeavour, but well worth the end result. It's things like that that I'm worried about, where permission has to be sought for the expenditure, incurring a lot of delay and sometimes perhaps not even having that decision implemented.
I'm not aware of any of these questions going to the commissioners. I'm sure their workload is full enough without us taking our individual cases to them. They would have to go to a higher level for approval, and they would have to fit within our budgetary terms, but we don't go to the commissioners with any of these things, to my knowledge.
Thank you for that. Question 6 is another question to Councillor Baker from Councillor Stone. Would you like to ask a supplementary?
Thank you, and thank you for the links. I will look at all of that evidence. Thank you very much for that. When we're looking at the Children's Trust, will we have indicators of what it is that's going to make an efficient and effective service? And is due consideration going to be given to issues around accountability?
Councillor Baker.
We are quite in early days as far as the trust is concerned. I think it's only just over a week that we actually have the final recommendation that we should move forward into a trust. There's an awful lot of work to be done to put that trust together, and we will be having a lot of presentations to members on everything that's going to be happening along the way. And I don't think, at the moment, it's looking as if it's going to be the best thing possible for our children, which is actually the only thing that I'm concerned about. I'm not a favour of trusts, and it certainly isn't going to be outsourcing. But what we must consider here in Northamptonshire, that our children's service is fragile. We need to do the best that we can in order to safeguard the children for the future. And we will be working on that, but that is early days yet. We'll probably start a lot more briefings for members in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you very much for that. Question again to Councillor Baker from Councillor Meredith. Yeah? Oh, yes, yeah. John.
I was first appointed to the parenting board, the corporate parenting board, and I was told that the corporate parenting board was going to be more looking into issues that would affect children and looked after children. I'm a bit surprised about the short response to the question that I've had. I was under the impression that we should have been told that the social workers involved with these two children that was under serious case review. Why wasn't that? Why, if the parenting board is going to be looking into these things, why was it not put on the agenda? Because I don't agree with your answer.
I'm very sorry, Councillor Meredith, that you don't agree with my answer, but that is the answer. These two very sad cases were not looked after children. So they would not therefore come to the corporate parenting board, which is purely set up for all of our looked after children, fostered children, children in care, not for normal families. So the serious case review in this particular situation would never have come to the corporate parenting board. And we also have to be very, very careful of the legal obligations to us all to keep things as private as we can in order to safeguard the children, the rest of the family, but that is really the reason. It would not have come to the corporate parenting board because these were not looked after children in that way.
Yes, if you want, yes.
I think this is a very important issue for us because as far as I'm concerned, the social workers that was involved with them two children, we would have talked about social workers within the parenting board.
Thank you for that. Question 7, which I omitted because it was such a short answer, I missed it out. So question 7 to Councillor Baker again from Councillor Birch. Okay, thank you for that. Have we any other verbal questions anyone wants to ask before we move on? Can I ask Council to note the report? Thank you very much. Item 10, scrutiny business. And if I can invite Councillor Scrimshaw to propose the report for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. councillors will remember that Max Caller spoke of the difficulties in changing the culture of an organisation quickly, and indeed it was that difficulty that led him to propose his setup for unitaries. Unfortunately, scrutiny doesn't have the luxury of time and is having to change the culture of scrutiny far quicker than perhaps we would have thought possible. But I think we've made some real progress towards this. We're not there yet, but we've made a really good start, and we have a good committee with committee members eager to embrace the need to do things differently and more effectively and efficiently than in the past. And I hope this report gives a flavour of how that's happening. There are still one or two issues we need to address, and we're still working out exactly how our work can best fit in with the procedures of the organisation. We've had, for example, to change the agenda of next week's meeting 3 times because it wouldn't have been possible to have had the officer support we would have needed to do what we originally intended. I mention that not as a criticism, nothing against officers, but simply an acceptance that, you know, there's still work to do in forming our own set of procedures that best reflect the workings of the council. The Centre for Public Scrutiny, for example, have often told us of the need to start work on the next year's budget earlier, and we haven't yet found a way to do that. Although I'm hoping that we'll receive a response to our request for a better understanding of the financial timetables that the council uses, so we can adapt ourselves to fit in with that. There's also still an issue of receiving timely responses to our requests for monitoring and other information. But again, I'm confident that there is now an acceptance of the need for this to happen. We just need to tinker with the procedures to find the best way to make it happen. So far, however, we have the work we've already done, I hope will prove to be useful work. And I'm pleased to report that Cabinet and the Council's leadership appear to find our input useful. Of course, the real proof will be to see how that will support Council decision-making in the future. But all in all, scrutiny continues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. I have one speaker so far for the questions. Councillor Stamber.
Thank you very much, Chair, and can I thank the Chair of Scrutiny for his report, and I'd like to add my own concerns to his concerns specifically around budget scrutiny. It was the 24th of April when the committee requested that it would receive the medium-term financial planning timetable, which would help it greatly in timetabling its budget scrutiny. And as far as I'm aware, we've not received that yet. I sincerely hope that officers can provide that very, very soon, because we don't want to be held up in budget scrutiny, do we? Emerging savings plans or proposals was the #1 bullet point in the CFPS report on scrutiny in Northamptonshire that it recommended we should receive at our pre-meet on a regular basis, and to my knowledge we're not getting such information either. And also risk registers, including risk mitigation measures. I'd be interested in looking at how the risk registers are applied with regard to budgeting in this council, and I'm hopeful that the Chair of Scrutiny might agree with me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, I omitted, because it's not on my sheet, to ask for a proposer or seconder for the report, and I haven't got a name. Does anyone want to second it? Thank you very much, Councillor Perry.
Yes, I'd like to second the report. Just to say a few words now, I think that cross-party, there's been some really good working on the committee, and I think that sets an example that we can take forward into the unitaries. I think it's been really powerful. I do think that as part of the culture change, there does need to be a clearer sense of urgency in terms of responding to our requests for information. You know, we do it because we want to be helpful and we want to be transparent, but we don't want to have to keep chasing. We want to ask once and get that information, and the Centre of Public Scrutiny would support us and say that that is a standard expectation, as is the presence of senior officers when requested, which, to be fair, most of the time that has been the case and they've represented themselves very well. But I think this is not just the scrutiny committee's job, this is everybody's job to support us in doing what we're trying to do very well. But that aside, I'd just like to say well done to the Chair for moving it forward so much.
Thank you very much for that. That's got us back on the straight and narrow. Councillor McGee.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm sure my comrade in front of me won't appreciate me throwing a question in off the hoof. But I do have concerns about scrutiny. I think they're doing a fantastic job for one, but we don't have enough time or resources to look at other issues and service issues, and particularly in children and adult social care. I just wonder if the Chairman of Scrutiny would agree that there is still a lot of gaps that we should be looking at as councillors that we don't have the resources or time to look at.
Thank you very much. Any more questions to overview and scrutiny? Could I ask Councillor Scrimshaw to respond?
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I would like to agree with the two Vice Chairs of Scrutiny who have spoken. Councillor Stamber, certainly, I think we do need to understand better the sort of risks around budgets, and I totally agree with Councillor Perry about the usefulness of cross-party working. That's, if anything, that's one of the things that so far has come out of the whole process that I think we can all learn from. Councillor McGee, yes, I do. I do agree. The scrutiny obviously has time and resources pressures on it. We are slightly restricted by what we can do. We have a remit to look primarily at the budget, although we do recognise that also includes things of significant concern to residents around service delivery. We are trying within the restrictions we have to do the best we can. We meet once a month formally. We meet a couple of times a month informally, but it is still very difficult. I'm also very conscious that the Scrutiny Committee is made up of 15 backbench councillors, and that means there are an awful lot of people here who don't have any involvement either with the Cabinet, with the leadership, or with scrutiny. I think that's unfortunate. I can't change that. I would, however, put a request to those councillors. You are more than welcome to attend to scrutiny meetings, and if you have any input, suggestions, comments, they would be more than welcome at those meetings. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Can I ask Council to note the report? Thank you. Item 11. And can I invite Councillor Birch to move the motion?
Thank you, Chair. After a decade of austerity, which has deliberately gutted local authorities, and I quote from the recent UN report, resulting in shrinking library, youth, police and park services, the government has reduced local government funding, introduced benefit caps and universal credit with a 5-week delay in benefit payments, privatised services, including rural transport. The effects of this on our residents are shocking. We see the rise in the use of food banks, rough sleeping, hidden homelessness, falling life expectancy for some, the decimation of legal aid, the denials of benefits to the severely disabled, and the impoverishment of single mothers and people with mental illness. 0 hours contracts and agency work mean no regular income and stability for families. NCC figures show that in Northamptonshire we have over 47,000 children living in poverty. In Northants, 13% of children live in low-income families, and that's 15% in the West Northants proposed unitary. 2/3 of children growing up in poverty live in a family where there is at least one member working. 1 in 6 pensioners are living in poverty. In Northamptonshire, that adds up to 20,000 over 65s. What are the effects of living without enough resources? Poor physical and mental health, a low sense of well-being, social deprivation, feeling unsafe and insecure, debt, fragile families, poor, inadequate, insecure housing. The effects on children are significant. They're more likely to feel like a failure. They're often hungry, too hungry to sleep, and then too tired and hungry to engage in lessons in school. They underachieve at school. By GCSE, there's a 28% gap between children receiving free school meals and their wealthier peers. They cannot join in activities or invite friends home. They often do not have their space or resources to study at home. Pensioner poverty is rising, having fallen steadily for nearly 2 decades. The figures prompt fears that many pensioners will be forced to choose between paying for heating or buying food. About 20% of all pensioners rent their home, and the proportion is growing. 31% live in social housing. They have no control over rising rental and energy costs, which go up faster than their benefits. So how can we address poverty and break the cycle of intergenerational poverty? We can support families into work and increasing earnings. We can offer secure jobs and training, early intervention when problems arise to build resilience, debt advice, identifying and dealing with individual and family debt, money management, encourage financial planning, encourage savings, knowing where to access appropriate financial advice, affordable credit, discourage the use of loan sharks, and promote the use of credit unions and access to bank accounts. We can monitor the use of food banks and maximise the registration of free school meals. Working with the transition to universal credit in relation to financial literacy and digital inclusion. We can identify families and individuals most in need of support. We can provide more social and affordable housing, provide affordable childcare, promote the living wage accreditation amongst businesses and other organisations. We can initiate schemes to promote energy savings. Could all be part of an anti-poverty strategy, which I believe should go forward into the new unitary as a working document. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I ask Councillor Stone to second the motion?
I'm pleased to be seconding this motion because I think this is something that's quite simple to do and has a huge impact. So if we look, for example, at a local authority who's already got an anti-poverty strategy, they published theirs in 2017 and it goes to 2020. They are already reporting in this report on the benefits of their strategy. And one of the things that really concerns me is the way we make decisions. If we go on making decisions without paying attention to increasing, the increase in poverty might be one of the consequences. That is what will happen. We will be guilty of helping shape an environment which is making poverty happen or keeping people in poverty or not helping people out of poverty. So the whole idea of having an anti-poverty strategy, I think, is a really important one. It's about us accepting that we are shapers and that people aren't just victims, that we can help support people not become poor, and we can help people when they are poor to survive, and we can help people out of poverty. And that's a gift that we've got. That is the power we have got as decision makers and shape makers. And it seems to me just an obvious thing to do that is within our gift. We have got lots of support to help us do that. This is the Joseph Rowntree support, which is talking about how we solve poverty. So we're aware of the impacts, aren't we? And I bet there isn't a single person in this room that would advocate for poverty. I bet everybody in this room would advocate for us to be helping support children in particular, but pensioners as well, out of poverty so that they can lead a quality of life. So the recommendations made for how we do that by the Rowntree Trust are these: boost income, reduce costs, develop an effective benefit system, improve educational standards and raise skills, strengthen families and communities, and promote long-term economic growth benefiting everybody. Now, I know we're not the national government, But we do have local powers and we do have local influence. And there are lots of those things that we can effect. I think it's really important that we learn to observe everything that we do in the knowledge that it's going to have consequences, either consequences for the good or consequences for the opposite, that are going to have negative consequences. Having an anti-poverty strategy would compel every service to look at all the decisions they are making in that light and make a judgment about whether what they're deciding is going to be helpful to working class people, to people in poverty, or whether it's going to be unhelpful. And I think that is the least that we can do in this current economic climate.
Thank you very much for that. I've got a few speakers for this motion, and to start us off, Councillor Roy.
Happy to support this motion. The Labour movement as a whole warned that austerity policies would hit the poorest and most disadvantaged first, and this has actually come to pass. The other issue is the widening gulf between the very rich and the very poor in terms of income. As Councillor Birch has stated, the barefaced facts are that work no longer pays for a significant proportion of those in poverty, and many families in poverty have one or more working parent. In Northamptonshire, it's a particularly salient issue for us, not only because of the statistics relating to child poverty and pensioner poverty, but also the statistics relating to social mobility, particularly in areas like Wellingborough and Kettering, which have some of the poorest social mobility potentials in the entire country. The other issue that we now have in Northamptonshire is the issue around universal credit, and I think there's been no dissent that this has had an extreme impact on local people's debt, local people and people in poverty and their ability to cope with issues. In terms of that UN Special Rapporteur report last year, it also not only talks about poverty, but talks about destitution as well. I mean, in the same, that report was published the month after Theresa May declared that austerity was over, and that so if it is over, there should be money coming into local government to provide essential support for those that drastically need it. The issue around having a strategy is that we actually do have a plan. And if we are there to do the greater good about serving our communities, we need to be focusing on those with the greatest need. It's important we do it at this point in time so that we give the best possible support to make sure that these really important issues are addressed in the unitary authorities going forward, to have the best chance of our communities being stable, prosperous, safe and healthy. Please support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor McCutcheon.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to urge support for this motion here. I want to concentrate on just a couple of points which will be of use to us, particularly as we move forward into a unitary authority. One of the things that this particular body does not have direct experience of is, of course, housing, which we will be moving into when we're in touch with our colleagues on district councils. And the fact that that is going to be linked together in a unitary authority will be of use and give us a real lever to produce a poverty strategy right across the board. It's important that housing is sorted out first. I've just been talking to colleagues this morning in Manchester and in Birmingham, where they make it a point of getting the homes first and then trying to sort out the benefits situation thereafter. The benefits, of course, are not being helped at all by the universal benefits. These have to be put together. The poverty stretches right across. Anybody who, like myself, has taught for years will remember the hunger holidays that kids suffer from. And most of us do keep food in our desks, don't we? To give to the kids who are quite clearly hungry in your class and can't learn. And that's been going on for years and years, and that extends to people who are not necessarily homeless. The homeless is striking us very much at the moment, as we just cross over the street there and see the people being evicted from the encampment in All Saints Church there, and that's happening over this last weekend. This can be dressed up, and indeed is dressed up, as being helping them. But have a word with the two fellows who are sleeping on the floor, on the pavement, halfway up St Giles Street. I had a word with them at lunchtime, as I went for my bowl of soup and they weren't going for theirs. And ask them whether it's a good thing to be being turfed out of their tents. This is extreme poverty. That's what happens at the end of the road. What we want to do is to have a poverty strategy which will intervene earlier on, and that's the benefit of this particular motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Auger.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You talk a lot of sense. There is an acute problem of poverty. The volunteer work I do in the night shelter clearly shows me that there are some very damaged people, some very poor people, some very in need people that we have in our communities, and we need to do more. My only concern about the way we're doing it here is that a lot of you talked about the unitary. I think we've got two shakers and movers there, both Stone and Councillor Birch, Councillor Stone and Councillor Birch are on the joint committees, and this is where this work needs to be done. We need to build the foundations of these policies, not only this in this area, but also in domestic violence, with the new authorities in the West and the North to ensure that we have joined up policies, protocols and working practices across the boroughs, the districts and the county, because we'll have a lot more more assets and more functions to do and get these policies in place. I think creating, my personal opinion this is, but trying to create a policy now to influence both the North and the West without our boroughs and our districts all involved is probably not the best use of time with our officer colleagues. I was thinking about all the transformation, the current improvement they need to do with regard to children's services. There is an awful lot of work there to do. Not to say that it isn't possible, but it's not a priority. But I think where it does sit and where we are quite close to is the formation of the shadow authorities and the work we can do on the joint committees. So you will have my support on the joint committees to raise these issues, to try and get these policies in place that on vesting day, at least we have some idea on how we are going to deal with these intractable problems that affect our community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor McGee.
Thank you, Chair. I'm saddened that we were trying to kick this back at least 18 months, because that's what it would take. And I understand why you would say that. But the problem is now, and it's a local problem, and we only have to look at the local voluntary organisations who's got the figures, who works nationally, and we should have them involved in our scrutiny and work with us. South Northamptonshire, for instance, children in poverty, there's 5,386 in South Northamptonshire. That shouldn't be happening in this day and age by any means whatsoever. There's different ways we recognise of measuring child poverty before you pay for housing, after you pay for housing. The fact is, it's still there. And that's a lot of children. Daventry, for example, is nearly 5,000. Who would have thought that when we were walking around this lovely rose, this shire of ours, that these children are living in poverty, so many of them. Northampton South, over 7,000. Northampton North, nearly 7,000. Corby, 8,000. Wellingborough, 7,000. And Kettering, 6,000. That's children living in poverty. And they're not all from families that are not working. Some of these are in families that are working and they're still going hungry. So I don't want to wait till unitaries come. I want us to be strong and start the process now. Let's get a draft policy up and then we will share it with the health and well-being and with the boroughs and districts so it's ready the minute that we do go into unitaries. Not wait. Let's start involved now and get this policy up and running so that these children that we've mentioned that come from all our areas can have a better life, because we know they don't have great life chances unless we can make that difference. So please support this policy.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I have to apologise that I have to read this motion where we're classing about the poor in our society. I think we are one of the richest countries in the world, and yet we've got a motion here which is saying that we seek to protect people and families becoming poor. What a slight on us. And what a slight on the Conservative government. And we mustn't forget that. We must not forget that. It's a Conservative government that is creating the poor. Always, when there is a Conservative government, the poor in this country rise to a rapid rate. What a disgrace. What a disgrace. I have recently been elected to the chair of the scrutiny panel for food poverty on the Borough Council. We're looking into what we can do as a Borough Council to help eradicate this problem that people in this country are going without food and relying on food parcels. And that is another disgrace. And let me just tell you this. I arrived for the scrutiny to really going to look into how we can help. And what happened? The Labour Party was there, they represented, but not one Conservative turned up. I have made a complaint to your whip on the Borough Council that not one of his colleagues had the decency...
Point of order, Mr Chairman. 14.2 of the Constitution.
Well,
the matters of, operational matters of the Borough Council have no relevance to this chamber.
You don't like somebody, through the chair, they do not like the truth. Don't like the truth. So anyway, Mr Chairman, I am going to support this motion. I'm going to support this motion.
Councillor Mercer.
Sit down.
Yes, Councillor Mercer.
Yeah.
Mr Chairman, members are required to speak to the motion. What goes on in the borough is not anything to do with this motion.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Mr Chairman,
I do agree with that.
Can I explain? It is all relevant. It is all relevant. It doesn't matter what you say, it is relevant to this motion that we are trying to eradicate food poverty. Lots of people in this country are classed as poor citizens, and that is what I will not tolerate that while I'm a councillor. I don't want to see kids going without food. I don't want to see elderly adults going without food. And you can shout all you like. I will have my say. So, Mr Chairman, I'm going to support this, and I'm going to say thank you to the Labour Party for putting it and to making this debate open so we know where we are. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think you have at least had your say, but I do agree with the point that it seemed to apply to the borough mostly. If we move on to Councillor Smith-Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare two interests, one as a trustee of a homelessness charity in Kettering and one as a volunteer for a charity that supports people anywhere within the criminal justice cycle in Northampton. And that, I think, both are very much apply to this motion with regards to poverty. I can also talk. The first time I heard the name Rowntree was when I was studying economic and social history. So that suggests that the issues of poverty have been around for more than 100 years. And whilst absolute poverty is one thing, relative poverty has raised, the bar has been raised over the years. So we don't see children without shoes roaming in the streets, etc., as might have happened in Victorian times. And on that, I would also like to say, Councillor Meredith, I'm absolutely disgraced that you use this issue to attack Conservative government when this has been going on for over 100 years under all governments. So let's just take the politics out of it. Let's think of the people here that are in need. My issue is that this relates more to vulnerable people, people who would benefit from education in a different way to just, you know, sort of getting good grades at SATs. We need to introduce more budgeting skills into our schools. We need to support people who have come out the other end of their schooling time to be able to sustain tenancies. And not everyone can sustain a tenancy because they may have a mental health or an addiction issue. So we need to be looking at this at a higher level, I feel, than this county council, because we need to get government support in on this. We need to set up a fair network with our voluntary sector, because at the moment so many charities are battling with each other for such a small pot of funding, and then we get announcements like, you know, the removal of money from the OPFCC. It's so difficult for charities to support these vulnerable people. And if you're supporting, for example, a mother who has experienced domestic violence or who has been involved in... Sorry.
Could you wind up?
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to say that supporting adults helps with the whole family, which also helps with children. So I don't think that this, calling it a poverty strategy, really sort of hits the mark.
Thank you for that, even though it has gone over. It would be nice if you could address the chair rather than other members of the council. Our next person is Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to start by saying that our friends on the opposition don't have a monopoly on caring about people who are in impoverished circumstances, and I find it highly insulting that they do suggest that it's Conservative policy that has put them in this position in the first place. All of us here care about the poor in our society. We all care about any single child or any single adult that is poor or below the poverty line. But this anti-poverty strategy just isn't the correct strategy. The Conservatives have fundamentally always worked on the principle of building a strong economy. A strong economy leads to jobs and increase in living and things like that. Therefore, we have to say that I cannot support this motion, because I do believe that an anti-poverty strategy is the incorrect terminology, perhaps. But at the same time, what I would like to see is an economic policy for the whole county, indeed for the country. Some would say that the Conservatives have been working on the economic policy for the country for a very long time and have been putting right some of the inequalities that were built in by the Labour Party when they left office, whenever it was, back in the day. Anyway, at the end of the day, this does not do any of that. We need to build an economic strategy within the 2 new unitaries that covers the county. We can't waste time now looking at an anti-poverty strategy, or indeed any strategy. It needs to go, as Councillor Auger said, to the 2 new unitary, the 2 systems that are building it up, and we need to put that to them for the future of the 2 new unitaries. I do feel that this motion is largely being directed at central government rather than us as a county authority. Although I would obviously argue that government has been doing a lot of what needs to be done already, the motion doesn't refer to these, and these aims for which the opposition have put forward in the motion are not aims that we can necessarily deliver. It does smack of something drafted by Labour Central Office to me, rather than by Councillor Birch. At no point has anyone approached me from the opposition bench to ask me if this is something we consider doing, or indeed, as far as I'm aware, approached anyone in the Cabinet or indeed in the Conservative benches to see if this is something we consider doing. Instead, they brought it here so they can air it in public. An interesting policy. This is gesture politics at best, and at worst, an attempt by the Labour Party machine to subvert the independent thinking of our opposition colleagues. Chair, I will not be supporting this motion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brookfield, did you want to speak? Okay, thank you. Councillor Perry.
Thank you. Have I landed in an alternative universe? Now, I don't agree with Councillor Morris. I'm pretty sure this motion has come from Councillor Birch and Councillor Stone, because I know that it's something that they're passionate about. But I don't know if anyone's noticed, we are still in crisis. Our children's service is still in crisis. And the best thing we can do to help families in poverty is to get our services, adults and children, in as stronger, robust form as they can possibly be. And whilst this is very noble, and I agree, I think taking this forward to the unitaries, as Councillor August said, I will champion that, and I support your aims. I don't support the central politicisation of it. You know, it's irrelevant. We're here and we're now. We need a permanent team of well-qualified social workers with low caseloads, and when we have that, then we'll be in a far better place to deliver a poverty strategy. So going to the unitaries, let's be fighting for national paying conditions for those social workers. I've got a clap from Councillor Roy, it's a first. but we have to get the basics right. You know what Calla said. And whilst this is very honourable, and it has very honourable and noble aims, we've got to get our house in order, and all the attention of our officers and ourselves needs to be focused on that for the next 2 years, if those unitaries are going to work and if those unitaries are going to be anywhere near a position to deliver a strategy like this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Chairman. There's two reasons people get in, or several reasons people get into poverty. First of all, low income. Secondly, misuse of the income. That's very basic stuff. We can increase people's income by getting more and better jobs into the county. We've done a very good job of growing our local economy, but we've got to do more. We need to get higher paid jobs, not just more of them. And that is the first thing we've got to do. Second thing is teach people how to use what income they get. Now, in schools, as was mentioned, there doesn't seem to be a subject, budgeting. People don't actually get taught how to run a household. There was a time when people picked it up from their parents, but it doesn't seem to come down the generations anymore. I see families where there is an adequate income, yet they're in poverty because they misuse it. Not in the way that happened, say, in the 17th century where they went out to gin palaces, but where they spend money on, too much money on, say, mobile phones of a better quality than they need and things like that. It's not rocket science, but if we're going to want to really tackle poverty, two things we need to do. One, focus on growing the local economy and average wages. And two, start looking at ways we can teach people who are reaching adulthood how to manage a budget.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hughes.
Yes, I write a lot of strategies for various things, and I must say it's the operational bit that matters, isn't it? So I just have one or two suggestions that the new unitary panels, of which I shall not be part, might do. First of all social housing should have solar voltaic panels on. Why in Brighton can they insist in planning that they have panels on social housing? There is nobody heating poor, energy poor then. So we should insist on that in our planning. Some of you will be in planning. I've asked it over and over again we do that. Why do we allow them to build these big sheds without panels on the top? Not great wind farms that only work now and then, but the panels on the top. If we insisted they put the panels on the top, we would have a lot more energy, which we all agree with, we've heard earlier today, because after all, if we have electric cars, we need to generate electricity. We need to, of course, like we've heard, we need to make sure our prevention strategy is right to help these people who are on the fringe of finding difficulties, help them and we no longer have for the children's centres, regrettably, but that kind of action that actually focused in the last part of the children's centres on actually the people in need, rather than the people who had nice Christmas things, was such a good thing. We need to make sure that's back. We need to make sure that we help the voluntary organisations. £10 for a voluntary organisation often means £100 worth of help. I'm a trustee, and I've already declared it, so I'll say it again, of Service 6. Service 6 does a tremendous amount of work with young people right on the fringes of taking drugs and all the rest of it. We must ensure that we do support the voluntary things by actually helping them with courses as well as money. I could go on, but you can see what I'm trying to say. It's great to have a policy. Of course we should have a policy to help people in poverty, but what we need to do is then put it into action to make sure our policy becomes an operation to do something about it rather than talk about it.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor? Yes,
Thank you, Chair. I don't really know. We've always had poverty. You know, it's not about politics. We've always had it. And it's how we manage it. And I think it's a lot to do with, Chris was saying, education and how, and Danielle says, my background is teaching. And I've always taught people with challenges. And I think we have to look at how education going forward, how we teach these people, how to manage their finances and how to do things more innovatively. And as part of my new portfolio, I am the lead for adult education, and I've taught in adult education for a long time. But I just want to give you some good news. We've actually been awarded more funding this year for adult education, and that is about making sure that the people of Northamptonshire are given the choice, because it's out there, to get the qualifications, the basic qualifications that they need. When you have these basic qualifications, you can get better jobs. You know, we've got to be more positive. But the trouble is, we don't take these opportunities. They're out there, we offer them, but we don't get enough uptake. But the ESFA has recognised our fantastic work that we've done in providing these basic qualifications, and they've given us more funding. So that is what I'm going to be concentrating on, making sure that people know that these qualifications and other qualifications are available. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hakewell?
You'll be pleased to know, Chairman, I was really not going to contribute to this debate, but when you hear the comments around, I wonder if those people who find themselves in that situation of not having the resources to look after themselves or put a roof over their heads, if they were sat here in this chamber today, what they would go home thinking we were actually going to be bothered to do about it, other than to talk about whose fault it was, who left a note saying there was no money left, who created austerity and so on. And it seems so sad, and that's probably why this council will dissolve and go away, and hopefully there'll be some fresh faces in the new unitary, that we're bouncing around talking about, we always had measles, we always had poverty, so that's okay, there's a section of the community statistically which will always be poor, let's ignore it from that point of view. That is ridiculous. We had scurvy, we had all sorts of things, but it was our forefathers, Chairman, and I would suggest if you look at some of the portraits up here, now perhaps they weren't particularly benevolent, perhaps they were making sure that people were fit and healthy to come into the shoe factories and do a day's work. Maybe it wasn't benevolence, but they at least got things done, and those were our forefathers, foremothers, forepersons, who actually sat in this chamber and tried to get things improved. Now, when we keep talking about we haven't got the resources, we're talking about the people who genuinely haven't got the resources to find their way out. And when we talk about teaching them to use their money more successfully and so on. How patronising is that? They don't want to be there. They would like to pull themselves out of that situation, but they do it of their own volition, through their own work and effort. The thing that does strike me, and we talk about the joint committees, I have, like Councillor Hughes, no part in that at all. I can go along and listen if I'm good. But it strikes me that this motion, we started to create a strategy in this very room. And surely that's the basic principle of what we do. There were things about solar panels and so on that could go on roofs. So what I'm thinking, Mr. Chairman, is perhaps we should get into the point of having informal groups of councillors who can be bothered to turn up and create some sort of background papers that are outside of the politics, that are outside of what might get passed through council, and put those papers into the joint committees, informally, because we care, not because we care about our politics.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. I intend the last speaker to be Councillor Irving Swift.
Thank you so much. I will come to where I know where I come from, France. My grandmother was indeed very poor because she had she became a widow. And when she became a widow, she had no means to live. Now, in our century, and we are lucky because we don't have that kind of poverty. That was abject poverty. Now we have relative poverty. And relative poverty is maybe difficult to qualify, but I will remind everybody, we will always have people who are poorer than us, and we will have always people who are richer than us. But we all have something in common. It's called humanity and kindness. And if we will be kind and treat people the way we want to be treated, I think that is what we should do. So no strategy, nothing. When you see somebody who needs a cup of tea or a shoulder to cry on, you give him time. And we can have strategy, and the strategy that the Conservative want is good education, job, economy. When we have that, we will have eradication of poverty slowly and surely. But you will always have differential because they have tried everything they could, and there are a few books that try to say we can eradicate poverty. Unfortunately, so far, no one had a magic wand. I wish we could have it. But for me, kindness is what we should all start with, and humanity. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Could I ask Councillor Birch to sum up then, please?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think we've probably developed quite a strong anti-poverty policy here this afternoon. I'm quite astounded at some of the responses, but I thank you all for making them. Councillor Roy, I think you're absolutely right that the poor are the greatest, the poor always suffer the most, and the gap between those that have and have not widens all the time. Housing, very important. Thank you for that, Arthur McCutcheon. Councillor Smith-Haynes, you think we need a strategy to manage their lives? People need a strategy to manage lives. Well, that's exactly what an anti-poverty strategy would help with. It would give the scaffolding for the people that need it to access those services. Councillor McGee, we do need to do it now. We can't put it off until unitary. That's 2021. It's quite a long way away. And people will be needing the help, the support before then. Life was not going to get much better in the meantime. There's many more comments. A lot about the need for good jobs, wages to go with them. That's a given. That's something that I spoke about. And we do need proper jobs that aren't zero contracts. People that work for agencies don't know whether they're going to be working the next week, the next month. They can't get a tenancy on a rented property. They are continually worrying about where they're going to live. That produces huge amounts of stress. Across the county, there's a huge economic difference between at various areas. Councillor McGee has already talked about the numbers of children living in poverty in different parts of our county. And this huge variation absolutely shows the need for an anti-poverty strategy as we move towards unitary. Setting the principles now at this point will help the integration and the fairness as we move forward into the North and the West unitary. Now, there's a huge cost involved in poverty. Cost to the government, the cost to this council, the cost to all the services and the voluntary services that support us. In 2013, a report estimated that child poverty costs the UK at least 29 billion each year. Of this, 20.5 billion is a direct cost to government, resulting from additional demand on services and benefits, as well as reduced tax receipts. That's something that we can do something about within our county, using our voluntary services, including them in a strategy, and making accessible to everybody the help and support that they need. We have at the beginning of many of our papers produced in the council the statement, people of all ages are safe and protected from harm and able to live happily, healthy and independent lives in our communities, and they achieve economic prosperity. The statistics that we've talked about today prove otherwise, and I think we have a duty to do the best we can within the time frame available to us to establish basic principles that we can move forward with. This may be, as Councillor Hakewill suggested, a working group that can just set a few principles. We've heard a lot of ideas here today that would help directly with moving people forward with their lives, giving them better life chances and getting them on the road to happy and healthy children and families. It's something that we can't put on hold for another 18 months, and it's something that we should feel it is our duty and our responsibility to move forward now. I ask you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We come to voting on the motion. Can I ask those in favour of the motion? Those against? Thank you very much. The motion is defeated. Coming on to our next motion, can I ask Councillor Scott to formally propose the motion for us?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Fellow councillors, this council has been shamed by the outcome of the recent case reviews into the tragic deaths of Child AK and Child AP, which occurred in December 17 and April 2018. And I'm sure everyone in this chamber was immensely saddened by their murders. In February 2013, we received 4 separate Ofsted judgments of inadequate. The Cabinet member was relieved of his position as a result. In October 2013, Government instructed us to set up an improvement board with an independent chair. The board operated as a statutory board until November 15, then for a further year to ensure progress was being made. During that period, we had 2 Cabinet members covering children's services, one after the other. One was sacked after a year. The other became the leader of the council in May 16. In April 16, we received an Ofsted report which rated us as requiring improvement. It highlighted a number of areas where we had improved and spoke about areas where we needed to improve. And from that report, there were comments like too much focus was on process needing to be completed rather than day-to-day experience of children and young people. The quality of social work practice was variable, with much that needs further strengthening. In many cases, there were gaps or supervision was poor. There were issues about the frequency or quality of visits, and plans were not sufficiently focused. Drift and delays was experienced by children and young people. Audits were of variable quality, some excellent, others failing to identify poor work. There are also examples where deficiencies have been identified by auditors, child protection conference chairs, or independent reviewing officers, but no change had then occurred to address the identified delays. Workers are not always thorough enough, it said, when they look at the risk to children and young people, and they do not always do enough to understand what children and young people need. Their assessments of the need of parents and their unborn babies are not good enough. Plans to help children, young people and families are not clear enough. They don't make sure actions are completed in time. Assessments are not consistently thorough. They don't always effectively evaluate the experience of the child or the young person. And as a result, social workers do not always understand their needs well enough. Case histories do not always inform the assessment, and this leads to some poor analysis. For instance, in some cases, there had been a lack of understanding of the impact of parental mental health or substance abuse issues on children and young people. Research is rarely used to inform the findings. If you've read the serious case reviews of AK and Child AP, you'll see the same issues being highlighted. Apart from that, and that was in the one that was recently produced. Apart from that brief period in 2016, it's clear from the case reviews that where it really is an issue of life or death, the service we offered had become steadily worse, not better. I think we all recognise that there's no infallible method of spotting potential child murderers, but we do have a statutory duty to protect children in our community, and this should be our number one priority, as was said by a speaker earlier. We know from the Ofsted report since 2013 and the serious case reviews that while there had been many improvements in the service we offer, at the sharp end of the area, where it really matters, we'd consistently failed our community of Northamptonshire. Government had to appoint a commissioner for children as a result of a lack of progress. The commissioner had to recommend that the service would not be safe, in a safe condition, to move to unitaries in 2020. The current director has said it's impossible to say when a good rating might be achieved. Many of those responsible are no longer in our employ or no longer councillors, but our current leader is. Councillor Golby was appointed Cabinet Member for Learning Skills and Education in May 2014, and Children's Services was added in May 16. This was the month after the Ofsted report was published. Councillor Golby had that brief until May 2018, and while he said he didn't have sight of individual social work cases, it was his direct responsibility to ensure our service prioritised child safety and improved our service taking account of legislation, government advice and the Ofsted reports.
Councillor Scott, your 5 minutes is up.
Can I have just one more, Chair?
All right, yes, just one.
It's time for Councillor Golby to face up to his responsibilities. That is what the people of this county would expect. I'd urge you to support this motion, ask you to send the message to the communities that councillors do face up to their responsibilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Could I invite Councillor McGee to second the motion?
Chair, I will second the motion and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. I have a range of speakers who want to contribute to the debate. First of all, Councillor Golby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to make a couple of very brief points, if I may, through you. So first of all, I've spoken many times about my commitment to moving this council forward since I've become leader, and that commitment stands. I've made my apology on behalf of this authority in relation to the two very, very tragic serious case review cases that has prompted this motion before us today. But quite frankly, right now, this organisation needs stability. And frankly, also this motion, I find, is totally irresponsible. The opposition groups, going back a number of months now, were offered briefings on the serious case reviews as an ongoing part of the process to share information. And I question the need to bring this motion today. I've been the leader through the most difficult time of this council and this council's history, and while I have the support of my group, I will continue to be the leader of this council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Strachan.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm hoping what I'm about to say is relevant. This administration has a lot to answer for. Not the overworked and underpaid social workers to whom we have been told have been disciplined. Passing the buck is cowardice and an inconceivable act. The BBC national broadcast put the blame squarely on the administration of Northampton County Council and went on to say some social workers had up over 60 cases assigned to them. They just could not cope. The broadcast went on. The department was also overloaded with agency staff. Chairman, the guilty parties are those who failed to take their responsibilities seriously, and they should stop blaming our overworked and underpaid staff. Since 2005, social services and children's services have been operating a closed shop policy on this council. Councillors who are not a member of the cabinet or part of the administration are told little or nothing unless there is a media outcry. Even when we are approached by concerned constituents or members of the public seeking information on issues surrounding families, relatives, or close friends, we find ourselves up against a brick wall of silence and arrogance by officers as well as cabinet members. Refusal to give us any information. Opposition members on this council are treated with contempt by this administration, and yet we are classified as corporate parents with a responsibility for children in our care, but only when it is conveniently suitable, so it looks good on paper, while in practice it's the opposite. Chairman, this administration has failed not only the children who have died on their watch, it continues to fail others in its care by not providing adequate safeguarding. For this service provider and our government, it is all about money, which is unfortunate, as nothing else seems to matter. I support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stamborough.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm also going to speak in support of the motion. You can delegate authority, you can't delegate responsibility. So where does the buck stop? Over the last 3 or so years, our children's services have had 2 adverse Ofsted reports, a commissioner appointed. Recently, we've seen 3 serious case reviews. We have one of the most expensive children's services in the country per head of population. We have one of the poorest performing children's services in this country. We can't recruit enough social workers. Our staff are overworked and, by acknowledgement, underpaid. And during all this time, the person responsible, either as Cabinet Member for Children's Services, as Deputy Leader of the Council as well at the time, and now as Leader of the Council, was Councillor Matt Golby. The responsibility lies with him. He is the politician in the position, and I feel that he should do the honourable thing and resign. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Auger.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to express great sadness at the death of these infants. I suppose what is particularly difficult, I suppose as getting older and being a grandpa now, you get a little bit more emotional, and especially having spent 30 years of my life trying to protect the vulnerable and the innocent, especially children. It's particularly difficult when you find out there were some failings operational that may well have been able to save these young infants, and it's absolutely devastating. So what should our response be? Well, having managed critical incidents and having been involved in incidents where people have died, then we look at what we have done and we learn from our mistakes. We have a director now who has now been charged to put in place things that will protect our vulnerable and endangered young people so that we don't have this again. Unfortunately, it's happened too many times in this country. It obviously tells me, it's not my area of business, it tells me that this is a really difficult area to deal with, and there are some significant challenges in us keeping safe. But let's first of all, who is responsible for this? Well, it's the two perpetrators are responsible for this. It's two perpetrators responsible for this that killed these two infants. And what really upsets me about this notion, and I have the utmost respect for my colleagues on the left, I really do. I love working with you, you have some bright minds, and what upsets me about this is you try to associate the death of these infants to one person. And that can never be right. There's no due process here. There's no investigation. There's no allegations of misconduct. It's purely your opinion that you are going to give a motion that uses these deaths politically to try to oust someone. One of our colleagues, the very leader who is trying to develop services here to make them better, who wants to get ourselves in a good position for unitary, that you want to oust them. And so what is the motivation? Is it to make children safer? Of course it isn't, because that's going to be done by the professionals, and hopefully with our scrutiny and oversight. It's actually to cause discord and confusion. And so that at the end of the day, what we do have, if you can oust a leader, then all it does, it makes the process of reforming ourselves and getting to unitary a more difficult process. So who does that benefit? You politically? Or does it benefit the residents that need stability at this time? I know mistakes were made, and I have always taken responsibility in my area of business to have done. But picking one person out, I think, is just cheap politics. It's lazy politics. There's a better way of doing it. There's a better way of doing it. We are all corporate parents, and all of us have a certain amount of responsibility to make this council work. So let's join together. Let's stop picking on people. I really don't like this mob bullying. It really frustrates me. It always has done. Let's support each other and try and get this council into a position where it's doing good services, and secondly, get ourselves prepared for unitary, and hopefully not have these mistakes in the future where we have the death of two innocent individuals. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start with a quote from a great man, if I may. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. I would say that the leader, and indeed the authority, and all of us, have met with great challenge over the last 2 years, and at times with some controversy and indeed unparalleled attention. There are still great challenges ahead in children's services and indeed across the authority as a whole as we move towards the 2 new unitaries. We are making headway on these challenges. This is not the time for the opposition to call for the head of the leader who has been at the front of the charge to bring this authority back into the black. He has made some tough decisions and in the past has been let down by officers that had reassured us all that the children in this county were safe. He has the backing of the group, the administration, the cabinet and the commissioners to lead us into the 2 new unitary authorities. This Labour motion comes from a Labour opposition that know full well the challenges faced by this authority and the complexity of the issues in the children's services. We're wasting time with this motion and we cannot support it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Brookfield.
Thank you, Chair.
there's been over a decade of letting children down in this county in terms of our children's services and the leadership in the council. I would accept that this is not the responsibility of one person, but there is some culpability of the administration down the years. And when I first became a councillor on this council in 2005, very shortly afterwards, there was the very tragic case of Victoria Clambier and the case of baby Peter and the ensuing report from Lord Laming. And there was a working group that was set up from amongst the Children's Scrutiny Committee, and I was a member of that working group. And all the lessons that we're still trying to relearn today, we documented in that report. And it's not as though this has been a surprise to elected members or to the professionals in the service. We keep having to relearn the lessons. No elected councillor in this room is directly responsible for the death of a child. But there has been a failing in the safeguarding structures in this council, and that's what lies behind the motion that's here today. The improvement board that was set up, that Councillor Golby and I were members of, that was disbanded a little while ago, was disbanded too soon in my view. We should never have been taken out of special measures, or at least out of the purview of an independent improvement board on children's services, because we still needed that support to ensure that the improvement that we claimed to be there was sustainable, because clearly it wasn't, because shortly after the board was disbanded, these cases happened. So there is a correlation between taking our eye off the ball, being complacent, and tragedies happening. We needed to keep the resource in place in those children's services, and we needed the improvement to be sustainable, and I'm afraid that that there was a failing there. I don't want to comment on the individual cases, but I do accept that there is an apology from across the floor. I would accept that apology if I felt that the culture was going to change and that we were going to look at the improvement in the service. But I have to add that I was disappointed by Councillor Baker's response to Councillor Meredith's question. It's not just our looked after children that we're responsible for.
You're going way past time.
No, this is really important, Chair. It's not just that our looked after children that we're responsible for. We are responsible for safeguarding vulnerable children in Northamptonshire. Whether they're taken into care or not, we make that decision at the point at which there is a child protection plan put in place.
Thank you. Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, I want to say to Councillor Golby, he knows full very well about his position, and since he's been leader, what has happened. There's been a catalogue of events. Some of these events have been highlighted today, and it is justified that the Labour group have put this motion before council. What has happened to this council since Councillor Golby has been in place? He changes his cabinet like there was no tomorrow. We can't keep up with who's who in the cabinet. How can you have stability when you keep changing the cabinet members? We had some really good cabinet members in place. We had an excellent children's portfolio holder, and what happened? Councillor Golby threw her out. Threw her out, said, no more. Don't need it, you're too outspoken. That's one of the issues Councillor Golby put into place. What's the other main issue, as I feel? We have Cabinet, where backbench councillors would go and represent their residents and put issues. Councillor Golby done away with that. Backbench councillors can't have a say in what has happened. I'm not going to go on about the 2 deaths of the 2 young children, although I feel greatly, greatly saddened by that. I think that when we get to that situation, and I'm not blaming Councillor Golby for that, but he is responsible. He is responsible. He's the leader of the council, and he was portfolio holder for children's services when that happened. The other things that keep on going is just a catalogue of all the time it's happening, everything. This council is now in a mode of instability. He is the leader of this council, and yet he doesn't take decisions. It's left to the commissioners to take decisions. That's where it's all come from, is the commissioners. And I have said on many, many times, send them back to London. And I mean that. If it was left to me, I would send them back to London. No hesitation. If I was the leader sitting with there, I would lead, I would be in charge. But Councillor Golby's not. He's not in charge. He's sitting there as a yes man. So I fully support this motion. Councillor Golby, do the right thing, stand down, let someone else have a go. You've seen it now with your colleague, Theresa May.
Thank you, Councillor Meredith.
She stood down. She knew when enough was enough. You should stand down, go, get on your bike and go.
Thank you, Councillor Meredith. Councillor Eales.
Thank you, Chair. Rising to support the motion, and in doing so I take absolutely no pleasure whatsoever. While I'm talking, I want members to not think about your fiscal restructuring. I want you to think about Dylan Tiffin-Brown and Evelyn Rose Muggleton. These are the 2 children named by the media as being subject to the serious case reviews. 2 children that were killed by individuals that should have protected and nurtured them. Instead, they murdered them. Now, whilst Councillor Golby is not responsible for the act, this authority failed to protect and prevent those acts. And unfortunately, as hurtful as it might be to hear, Councillor Golby at the time, as the Cabinet Member for Children's Services, is responsible. The buck stops there. And I think that some of the language that Councillor Golby opted to use in the media is to be charitable, regrettable, to reduce the deaths of children as this sort of thing, I thought was awful. It lacked empathy. I haven't heard what I believe to be an adequate apology. The report that we got given today, there is not one mention of an apology in that statement. Subsequent statements to the media have been continually inadequate. Yet the now Director for Children's Services issued to the national media a heartfelt apology. That director wasn't even in place at the time, so I find it astounding that Councillor Golby couldn't do the same. Instead, we get this kind of corporate speak about the need to turn this place around, and that's absolutely true. But you're losing focus on what matters. And if the deaths of children don't focus your mind, I'm not sure what else will. But something else that Councillor Golby said to the press, which I found absolutely astounding, was nothing that could happen within this authority will make me resign. Just think about that for a second. Nothing. If, I'll say it again, the deaths of children can't focus your minds, then what hope we got? But what I also find disturbing about that statement is the rank hypocrisy of it. Because there are people that Matt Golby has decided to remove from the Cabinet, the previous member for Children's Services, who was too outspoken, the former Cabinet member for local government, he was also too vocal. He removed the chair of the Pensions Committee simply for doing his job and protecting the pension fund. But yet this issue doesn't seem to be one that's worthy of a resignation. And I'll just finish on this, my message to all the Conservative councillors. There is a place for loyalty. It's rare a place for loyalty in politics, it is very rare. But blind loyalty, when you are staring the facts in the face, when we have dead children failed by this authority, if you choose this moment to simply rally round a friend as opposed to doing the right thing, you need to check your moral compass.
Thank you. I've had a list of about 15 speakers, or of 15 speakers, which is the same numbers I accepted this morning for the debate. I don't propose to accept any more. So we've got about another 4 speakers to go, which means that we should be about another 15 minutes or so, hopefully, with this motion. Our next speaker is Councillor Clark.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I am deeply saddened by this motion, and I'm very disappointed in it. I'm appalled at the degree of venom which we've heard from the other side towards Councillor Golby. Councillor Golby has been given a job in this council to lead it. Councillor Golby was elected by this council less than a month ago. Councillor Golby has probably the toughest job in local government in this country. At a personal level, I've known Councillor Golby for probably 15 years. I've had a lot of arguments with him. But I know Councillor Golby to be a man of honour, to be a man of integrity, to be a man who tells the truth, and to be a man who would not have let a situation like this develop had he been aware of it. Councillor Golby is also a family man with 2 young children. So I don't think people on this side need any lectures as to the importance of family life and the sanctity of children. And as one speaker said, we should be directing venom, if that's the right word, at these 2 awful people, excuse me, who perpetrated the deaths of these 2 children. But what we're doing with this motion is seeking a scapegoat. And frankly, that is the last thing we should be doing in this council. There's an expression in England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, I say, in sport, that you play the ball and not the man. It's a sporting expression, but I think it has parallels in public life. There are issues here which have to be addressed. And it's on the question of responsibility, Councillor Golby having accepted and apologised on behalf of the council to all in regard to the consequences of this. I don't think he could really have done any more. This all happened 2 years ago. But when we look at culpability and responsibility, and I'm not going to mention any names here, Councillor Golby had the misfortune, if you like, to be the cabinet member who had overall responsibility for this portfolio. He was supposed to have been supported by what Councillor Stone would call one of these highly paid officers, of which she considers we have too many in this council. Now, we have one officer, who I'm not going to name, but she's no longer with this authority, who bears considerable responsibility for, at very best, having misled Councillor Golby, that all was well in this directory, and at worst, having been extremely economical with the truth. She's not here to defend herself, so I don't propose to take that any further. But when we are let down as a council by people at a high corporate level whose job it is, and salary commensurate with it, to take day-to-day responsibility,
we're coming to the end
it is
of
entirely
the
wrong
allotted time.
to make culpability on the part of the council leader. Mr. Chairman, I'll leave it there, if I may.
Thank you very much. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Chair. Talk about loyalty to Matt. I was well hacked off when he sacked me. So, you know, I wouldn't be going out of my way to find some good. But in this situation, I took a long, hard look at myself and what I would do in his position. Last year, when I was portfolio holder, there were points when we had 300 allocated cases. It could have happened. I had sleepless nights. It could have happened on my watch. We realised the MASH wasn't operating safely. Ofsted came in. Ofsted gave us the green light, said everything was okay. The Department of Education wrote to Matt and said, well done, you're doing great. They put forward our previous Director of Children's Services, and I sat in cross-party meetings when she talked about these cases and what had been done to resolve the issues, and in particular the safety issues in MASH. And all I heard from all of us, myself included, and across the floor, was heaps of praise and support for good work done. I now question myself is I should have started a challenge earlier. Now, I went to the LGA, and the LGA give you training when you become a portfolio holder, and they give you questions that you should ask on a regular basis and tell you who you should ask. And at what point do you stop believing the answers to those questions? And I know that Matt asked those questions, and he asked them to the right people. Now, when it became evident that I maybe shouldn't be so happy with the answers, and I started pushing further, my LGA contact, a Labour councillor from the north, actually reprimanded me and said I should just be directing my scrutiny purely to the Director of Children's Services. Now, I didn't do that, but only because I had the benefit of hindsight. So I can't blame Matt in this because he was only doing what I was told to do. And at any point in time, it could happen to anyone holding this position. And there are councils where children's services could be outstanding when tragedies like this can happen. And it could be the worst run children's service in the country, which incidentally I don't think ours is. And, you know, thankfully the children could be safe from harm. But the most important thing is, would Matt stepping down benefit the children of this county? No, it wouldn't. We need stability. We need to be a council where social workers want to come and work to us. And I'm going to come back to that again. If we can get our staffing right in children's, and I'd like to see the commissioners get right behind that, because our children's service, sorry, I'm going through you, Chair, but our children's service will not change until we get the staffing sorted, and we need the support at the highest level for our Director of Children's Services. We need the commissioners, the CEO, to understand that, back it and make it happen.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I think with this motion, our opposition somewhat overreach. I won't ascribe bad intent to them, but I lament the fact that they bring up the situation with the two tragic deaths of the children in question. Neither through the serious case reviews, nor through anything that has been said today, has any culpability on the part of Councillor Golby been established. And nor should it, because in each case, guilt lies with one man alone, with the monster who stole the life of a child. And we must reject this culture creep of making a politician the scapegoat for every tragedy that happens when no political failing has been established. Why? Because by doing so, we reduce agency, and as a result, we reduce responsibility for those who would perpetrate evil. And so with this motion, I have to ask myself, how will this help? What will this achieve, other than allowing our opposition to metaphorically place Councillor Golby's head upon a spike in their group room and believe that they have succeeded in toppling a Tory enemy? It will achieve nothing. As our Chief Executive warned only a few days ago in a briefing to members, every time this council is destabilised in this manner, every time our name appears in the media in the darkest of lights, it sets us back from helping the very people that each and every one of us, I know, signed up to be a councillor in order to help. It makes it harder for this authority to recruit the social workers that we so need. It makes it harder for this authority to win the confidence of those people whose confidence we so need. And so, Mr. Chairman, whilst I won't ascribe any bad intent on our opposition, I will reject this motion, and I hope that my colleagues will reject this motion with the contempt that it merits.
Thank you. Councillor McGee.
Thank you, Chair. And first, can I start by saying I've got nothing personal against Councillor Golby whatsoever. He's a hard-working councillor, he's a family man, recently married. I've got all respect for him. What this is about for me is his ability to help deliver services and protect the children and the adults of this county. And as a cabinet member, a deputy leader and a leader, he has been responsible for the demise of the services that we needed to protect those vulnerable people. I've got every respect for him as a person. It's not his honour, his integrity we're calling in question. It's his ability to do the job. The same ability that he's judged you on when he's took you out of the cabinet and moved you aside from the leader, the deputy leader, to cabinet members. Everybody has to be judged on their ability to do a job. So this is not about an individual or putting a head up. In fact, if I was the leader of a group that something like that happened, I would stand down. I would. Because that's the right thing to do. It's taking responsibility for your actions. Not because somebody's forcing you to do it, because you know that you never quite lived up to the job you were supposed to be doing. So you put your own head on a block and you say, I've made a mistake, I'll stand down. That doesn't mean in a year or two later you fight back and become, up that ladder again and responsibilities and you learn from it. But you do the right thing at the time. And that's what this motion's about. There's no venom or contempt or anything about that. It's about capability of doing a job. And that's what it's about, especially for me. Because I know since Charlie McNally was Social Services Director and a Deputy Leader sitting there, when Charlie McNally says, don't lay off all these hard-working, experienced social workers, 40 of them, or we will be in trouble. That was ignored by your leadership, and look where we are now. In fact, rather than listen to Charlie McNally, the director at the time, they got rid of him. As you have many directors, because you don't listen to the professionals. So this is not about personal attacks. And I would still help Mark in any way that I could, because I think he's a decent guy. But this is about the capability of doing a job. As the commissioners said when they wanted the cabinet members and people in position, make sure they're capable of doing that job. Well, the evidence isn't there that the leader is capable of doing it. Great person, nothing wrong with that, but the capability is not there. So I would urge that you support this. I know you're not likely to.
Could you sum up, please?
I know you're not likely to, and that's your judgment. But at least the public would feel they've been listened to if the leader resigns.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Hakewell.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to pick up some of the comments, I think that some of the praise that was put towards children's services by Ofsted was more about the journey than the destination. We were doing better. Councillor Golby, and I would associate myself with all of Councillor McGee's comments in relation to integrity and the other kind comments he made. But in saying you need stability, and others have made exactly the same point, of the cabinet changes that have been backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, the number of people who have gone on to the cabinet and the short shelf life of a cabinet member doesn't say stability to me, or should it be just in the leader? When we went through those times, and there are many people here who aren't here now, who used to be here, the obvious way forward was evolution, not revolution. If our MPs and government had put their arms around and said, you're in a mess, how are we going to help you? Rather than taking the attitude of distancing themselves, and there, Councillor Golby and others and former leaders felt it very difficult to get the support of MPs to help us forward. If we'd have done that and pitted the amount of resources that are now going into the current cabinet, evolving from the previous administration, we wouldn't have gone through a lot of the issues that have taken place over these last 18 months. And we could have taken that situation forward even with something like an all-party cabinet, instead of simply looking at the politics. I'm sure Councillor Golby feels that he is confident. Many of his colleagues who went also felt confident of what they were doing, and yet they were disposed of, some by himself, directly. The removal of the chairman of pensions, who's actually now removed from the chamber, and indeed myself, 8 months after logically the same piece of legislation would have had me removed, taken away with no comment, no background, nothing, as far as the Pensions Committee, and taking out that skill, I think was a very poor decision, and it was made the worse for not telling us why. If there is equity in this council, there are many people, diligent, intelligent, family people, who served this council for a long time, who were pilloried. And if there's to be equity, the same needs to come back to the leader in that way. And the last point I would make is to start to blame officers. We have officers here who we employ.
Could you start to sum up, please?
I will be. We employ the officers here, the senior officers we employ. It's happened before, and I think any senior officer... Mr Chairman, you give me a few seconds for the barracking.
Yes, I mean a few seconds doesn't mean 15. I think you ought to consider summing up.
I am summing up.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Mr Hakewell, for that.
We employ the officers here, and any officer who sits here and hears councillors criticising them will not be giving their best and will be looking over the fence for somewhere where the councillors like them and respect them.
I think summing up, Councillor Hakewell, doesn't consist of going on. Thank you for that. Our last speaker is going to be Councillor Baker, who's going to keep to exactly 3 minutes.
I shall try my best, Mr Chairman. First of all, I'd just like to thank my colleagues, Councillor Auger, Morris, Perry and Brown, for their very good and succinct comments on the situation we're faced with today. Personally, being involved in the serious case reviews and the publicity involved in it, along with our DCS, Sally Hodges, I'm really, really unhappy and upset that you have chosen to use this in a public arena to bring forward today. The deaths of these 2 children were done by 2 very evil men who live in our community. And that's what the court said, and that was the judgment. I think bringing forward these children for political gain is appalling. I think that in the past we have had a lot of difficulties, and people know that. We've never said anything else. Councillor Golby has apologised on many, many occasions, so much so that at some time we said to him, Matt, now you must stop apologising. He has been a staunch supporter of myself and our new DCS in the sorting out of our children's service, as has Councillor Perry, who has helped me on many occasions. We actually need good social workers in our county, and do you really think these conversations are going to help us get good people coming to work here? Our CEO only said to us the other evening, we need to stop bringing forward these stories in the public because that is not encouraging people to come and work for us. Councillor Strachan has never, I don't know whether you contacted Councillor Perry, but you've never ever contacted me about any issues whatsoever. I always answer every I'm talking about, we're talking about now. If you contact me, I deal with every issue that comes to me. I promise you that is the case. Councillor Brookfield, all I was saying about Councillor Meredith was that it wasn't a conversation for the corporate parenting board, not that we did not care about looking after children. That's all. I fully support Councillor Golby, as he has fully supported me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Could I ask Councillor Scott to sum up now for us?
2 pages of it, Chair.
5 minutes.
Councillor Golby, first, he spoke about his commitment and his apologies. I totally accept those. But of course, Matt, you were in charge during that period of 2016 to 18, and that's the main period that the reports talked about and the issues occurred. Councillor Strachan, thanks very much for your comments. I support the idea that obviously that Councillor Golby is culpable by the position he held. Councillor Sambra, support delegate authority, not responsibility. Absolutely right. You know, people put themselves up for positions, we all do, and the public expect us to take responsibility for that. Councillor Morris, leaders being let down by officers and we're wasting time. He may have been let down by officers. I understand there's been investigations on that and private investigators hired to look into that, and there's nothing come to light, I understand. So, you know, I don't accept that you put the blame on officers. If you're in a position and you have a problem with what you're hearing or not hearing, it's up to you to sort it out, especially if you're the cabinet member responsible or the deputy leader or the leader. That's what being a councillor is all about. That's what you tell the public you're going to do. Councillor Buckfield, thank you very much for your comments. And I totally agree. One person isn't totally culpable. It's a failure of the system. And who was in charge of the system during that period? Matt was. Councillor Meredith, I didn't agree with all you said, but thank you for your comments. I wouldn't send the commissioners back to London. I think they're doing a reasonable job here. Councillor Eales, thank you very much for your strident support. You said this authority is at fault. You questioned the apology, and you spoke about the binding loyalty of members on the other side. And yes, I can understand that. But when it comes to these sort of issues, we're elected to take our views from what we see, and those reports are very clear. I guess all of you haven't read them, but I hope a lot of you have, because it really does clearly, when you look at the two reports in comparison, spell it out. Councillor Clark, deeply saddened. I think we're all deeply saddened about these issues. We're saddened at having to bring this motion, but I think the public expect us to. They expect answers. And in terms of venom, no, I don't have any venom at all. I totally agree with the views that Councillor McGee put forward so eloquently. And I do expect Councillor Golby to be a man of honour. He has seemed so far. And it's not an issue of seeking a scapegoat or putting it forward purely as a political issue. It's a very serious issue to the people of Northamptonshire, and especially to the underprivileged in Northamptonshire that have a preponderance of these sorts of issues. Councillor Perry, with all due respect, you came into office after the issues happened. You may have had the opportunity to look back through things, I don't know, but you seem to be talking about what's happened since then, not at the time, not during the 16 to 18 period, or even 17 period. Councillor Brown.
Could you start to finish the summing up, Councillor Scott?
You said neither of the reviews have any bearing. stop this culture, stop...
Personal explanation, please, Mr Chairman. I did not say that they didn't have any bearing. I said that they didn't establish culpability on the part of Councillor Golby.
Thank you.
Read through the
Councillor
reports.
Scott, we are running massively
Read through
over
the
time.
reports. And if you're fair, you'll come to the same conclusion, I would think. It's all about public trust. Public expect these sorts of things to be raised. They expect us to be talking about this in a public arena. It might be uncomfortable, and I think it's uncomfortable for all of us. But if we don't raise these sorts of issues, the public don't hear what we want to say. And I don't think I have any real comment to make that I haven't already made on Councillor Baker's response. Thank you.
Thank you very much, even though you do hold the record for running over. Yeah. Thank you. Can we move to the vote now? Can I ask Councillor if it accepts the motion, or those that accept the motion? Those against the motion? The motion is defeated. Thank you very much. We have got an item of urgent business, item 12, concerning a letter to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, which needs to be included in today's council. I've asked the monitoring officer to give us a short explanation of what it is about, and then Councillor Golby is going to propose the report.
Thank you, Chair. I just thought it might help members if I explained why this has had to come as an urgent item. We, soon after the decision by the Secretary of State that Northamptonshire was going to move into a unitary form of government, we had a letter from the Ministry to ask us for particular views on what he'd already stated in his statement. So he'd said in his written statement that he was minded to do the things outlined in section 5 of the report, but he still wanted to seek views. So this is just a confirmation back to the Ministry and to the Secretary of State that Northamptonshire is in agreement with those proposals. Each of the councils in Northamptonshire is taking this to their own sovereign councils for a decision. And we needed to bring ours to this council because we don't have another decision, a cross-party decision-making body between now and the deadline, which is a week's time. So thank you very much for your indulgence. I'm really sorry the paper was late. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions to the monitoring officer? Okay. Could I ask Councillor Golby to propose the report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to propose this. I accept also that ideally we'd have had much more time to have had sight of this, but as the monitoring officer mentions, we need to respond very quickly. If that window closes, then our views are not considered. And at the end of the day, this is about what goes in the structural change order, and it is government's decision. But I'm happy, and I know the other leaders are broadly happy with the items put in the suggested proposals at 5, so 5.1 through to 5.7. They all make pretty much, their common sense, and I urge Council to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask Councillor Bowen to second the report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got nothing else to add, except I am pleased to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. No, we have a few speakers before we all agree. Councillor Scott, did you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it does make eminent sense. I think we all want the 3 councillors per current division. We need to put that on record, on paper, and that's what we've done. And it's right that we send it to the Minister.
Thank you. Councillor Brookfield.
Thank you, Chair. Mine are a couple of questions, if I may. One is, at what point will the Boundary Commission be involved, say, after, during the period between 2020 and 2025, to consider whether there should be different boundaries from the current county division boundaries? Is there a plan to revise it at any point. And I'm not saying I'm not supporting what's in the paper, but I'm just asking if the Boundary Commission will be involved in that. And the other one is about parish and town council elections and what happens to those boroughs like Corby Borough, which doesn't have a parish council for the town itself. I know they're undergoing a governance review at the moment, but would they be expected to have parish and town council elections in 2020 as well, because it leaves the time very short? Pardon my ignorance, but I just thought I'd ask the council.
Thank you. Could the monitoring officer help us with those?
I hope so. First of all, on the Boundary Commission, we've had an indication that they will not be able to fit a review in the time between now and vesting day, which is 2021, but they will revert to us about when they feel they may be able to. So that's not to exclude them possibly doing it between 2021 and 2025. And then on the parish elections, it's planned that they will go ahead in 2020 as planned, as currently scheduled. Has that not answered your question quite? Perhaps we can take it out of the chamber if...
Yes, that would be
Is that
useful,
okay? Can I speak to you afterwards? Thanks.
Councillor Scrimshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only comment I've got, we're delegating powers to the Chief Exec to sort of pass on our comments. I wondered if it could also be an opportunity, however, for her just to mention to government the importance of, if we can, sticking to the timescales. I mean, it's been mentioned before, you know, Brexit, is it, that's going on in Parliament? I think anything that were to let the timescales slip even further would add further uncertainty, which really isn't helpful to local government locally. And I would just like the opportunity for parliamentary MPs to realise that. I don't think necessarily government always get local government.
Thank you. Councillor Stanwood, did you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite happy for us to write a letter, but I'm not happy about the content that's being proposed in a number of areas, and I'll tell you for why. So, at 5.2, we're told about the joint committees that are going to undertake preparatory work. Well, fine, yes, some preparatory work needs to go ahead, but those joint committees are, for instance, made up of councillors from certain political parties, and certain other political parties don't have any representation. And this council made a decision to put 3 Conservatives on those joint committees as its or in the North at any rate, as its members, when it could have done something different, but chose not to. And I suppose that all I can say there is that should, and I no doubt members opposite will say in the highly unlikely event that the political complexion of the authorities that are elected be different to the political complexion of this current authority, and for instance the Conservatives don't find themselves in a majority, those councillors from other parties might reserve the right to make some changes to the things that the joint committees think they have agreed. As regards election to 3-member wards based on county council divisions, I'm not happy with it. There was plenty of time for the Boundary Commission to undertake a review, to construct wards with 1, 2 or 3 members as appropriate. Sadly, the Minister dithered for so long that that time ran out. You know, we'll get what we get, but it could have been different. And finally, 2 more things. On the subject of postponing the elections, there are many people that don't agree with that. And had we had more notice of this item today, you may have found some of them here expressing their disagreement at the time. Sadly, that wasn't to be the case. So, can't support the recommendations as written, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else, any comments to make? Thank you very much. Could I ask Councillor Golby to reply?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Not much to add other than I recognise the points Councillor Stanborough makes from a very Liberal Democrat point of view. Disruptions, Councillor Scrimshaw mentioned Brexit. Of course, we're cognizant of a lot of things can happen between now and when the unitaries are looking to be established, including potentially a general election, the implications of Brexit and lots of other things. So we've just got to stick to the programme that we've got in place. It's moving on well. I think the MHTLG, as I put in my leaders report, recognise the maturity, the fact that people are working together well, and it is an exciting programme. So I'm happy to recommend these items in the recommendations to Council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Does Council accept the response? Thank you very much. Anyone against it? Thank you very much. Thank you. We have no exempt items today, which brings us at 3:45 to the end of our meeting, and very many thanks for taking such an active part in it today, and we will see you again in September. Thank you. Oh, thank goodness.